everybody, and welcome to Thought Raid, a show where we take on thoughts and find better ways of thinking about them. I'm Brandon Brown, owner of United Gamers Nations and a lay counselor, and with me today is the wonderful and handsome-looking Tim DeNock, a Break the Meta and life coach. And welcome. You didn't see that one coming now, did you?
You're too much, Brown.
And so welcome to today's stream where we're gonna wrap up what is essentially kind of like our first series. We it's a little bit insequential, I think, because we took a couple days to do a couple different topics in between. But however, we now are coming back to it, and we're gonna finally answer the question: how do you handle difficult people in your community? So let's just take a second first real quick. Let me go back over what the original topic was for those of you who are just now joining. In fact, I just realized, let me pull out my little handy-dandy notebook here that has all the listing points that we were going over so I can remember all the ones. So we went over things like what is a community. That was one of the first things that we were talking about back in Friday of last week, of which we covered that a community was a group of people that were united under a goal and at least an interest. Like people who are coming together, like so you might have like a football community of people that loves fantasy sports, and so like they're constructing their teams from different football team members to think what might be the perfect best team, and so that's the community. The people that their interest is that fantasy football or goal, and every community usually has an interest and a goal. So the goal could be like it's going to be family friendly, it's going to be a place where people can be a literal family, and know that they're welcomed and accepted and loved for who they are and not going to just suddenly lose their friends. So like goals. And then after that, we went into what are the first things that you should do before inviting people into the community. Because I really feel like you want to make sure that you have a couple things to be thought of. Like one, you want to make sure that you have an idea what the goal is for the community in the first place before you start inviting people into your community, because if the goal is not really well established, it could be people can come into the community and redefine the goal entirely because you never had one in the first place, and that could become a problem later on down the road. But if you have a pre-established goal that is very clear, and then you invite people into that, well, now they know what they're getting themselves into, and you have a stronger foundation to stand on. And then other than that, I was greatly suggesting that you have at least one other person to help develop the community with you before you start, because there's many things you can do alone, but survival is not one of them. Especially if you're getting to a bigger and bigger community, you want to have a team of people working under you. But then, Tim, you brought up the importance of that once you have, the general idea of what you're wanting to do and things are taken care of, don't try to plan for every little thing, because there's only so many things you can think about and the rest of it has to be experienced. And that is so much the case. There's a lot of things that, I thought I wanted to do or wanted to prepare for, thought I needed to deal with or something with UGN, my gaming community, that never really became a thing. And there was no amount of preparing that could prepare me for something that doesn't exist, and it would just been, it became wasted time. I remember when we first started UGN, I kept hosting meetings all the time, and we were trying to run UGN kind of like a business, and so we would, plan did you do this, did you do that, here's some goals and things we're trying to go for, but it just didn't really fit for the actual life of the community. It's just much more laid back in comparison to Thought Raid, where we have a lot more going on and to plan for, and it's just all those things I couldn't really figure out until I actually got into the heat of it. If I had tried to get everything perfect beforehand, it just, forget it. So we covered that, and then we kind of looked at some common problems that you would deal with as a community leader, and we looked into what is your role as the leader. But today, And that stuff, just to recap, that was on Saturday in particular. So if you want to kind of see the recap of all that, since there was a lot of it, that was on Saturday of last week. But this Saturday, this is where we finally get into the final question, which we're going to break down, which is, how do you handle difficult people in the community? Because you're going to inevitably deal with difficult people. And some difficult people are toxic, and you're going to want to get them out of the community because they will destroy the community from the inside out. But many of them are going to seem toxic, but are not really, and they're just going to simply be difficult. How do you handle the type of people that are not destroying the community, and it's clear they're not, they're just not getting it? They're either stubborn, or they're prideful, or they're anxious, or they surface insecurities in you. Like, what do you do with these type of people? So, Tim, you were going to help out this one, since this is still your week. You took some time to help me out by coming up with some questions and or topic points to go on. So I want to throw that your way, and then I'll jump in here and there, especially if you have questions. So take it away, Tim.
Yeah, well, whenever we go through a question, it's always asking the why before the how. So I kind of want to address that first. Let me throw this question in chat. So what comes to mind, or how do you feel when you think about difficult people in your community? Like, what do you think, Brandon, when I say difficult person, don't say who, obviously,
No.
But just think about who comes to mind. What is it about them that comes to mind? Like, how do you feel about it? Like, what is that exactly?
Yeah, so I mean, it's easy to talk about that. So, like, the difficult types of people that have been in and out of my personal community have been the type of people that are primarily stubborn. Like, stubborn people that come into the community can be sometimes the most difficult people, because they come in with their preconceived ideas, and that is the way life is structured, and don't you dare try to change that. And it's just like, why? Why are you so stubborn about these certain things? Like, that's a form of difficulty that I've had to deal with. Another form, which can sometimes teeter on toxic, depending on how far they go with it, although I've only had mostly mild forms of this, resentful people are difficult people in the community. If there are people that have a scorecard to keep, that could go two ways. That either they just are uneducated on that and they're not convinced of it, and so it's just unfortunate and you have to work through it. Or you have the toxic side where they're vindictive, and they're coming for you, and they have an ever increasing list that encourages them to increase in rebellion towards you and incite people to go against you, whether they actually know what's going on or not, when it turns out that they're just resentful. But on the more basic end, sometimes people are just resentful, and that's how they were raised, and they think that forgiveness should be some kind of long, tedious process or something, when it could be just immediately instantaneous. Or people that are prideful. I've had plenty of difficult, prideful people in my community, and the ironic part about it, I've had some people in my community that are literally, like, very imperceptive about things, and yet they are the most obstinate, and, like, they've come with answers, and if you say something different, they'll chuckle, they'll or snicker, or what's the word? There's a term for laughing, but in a negative way. It's akin to chuckle, but not chuckle is positive. Snicker's the closest to it. Scoff. They'll scoff at what you're saying. And that is so difficult when someone comes in with pride, like they know everything, and they've come with all the answers, and you try to present to them a difference of opinion, and they just shut it down because they've arrived and they've seen all this stuff. It brought me to a place, Tim. I can think of one particular person in mind where it brought me to the realization that that person's knowledge is paper thin. Like, they may have many papers of their knowledge, but knowing their life and how little they travel beyond their own house, I recognized that, like, most of it is just what they've read. And so, like, no matter how confidently they speak about what they think they know, I technically have more experience because I've technically been other places and seen many different people. So, like, I mean, like, other than that, I mean, even then, is still, like, my knowledge and that person's knowledge is still subjective in some ways, except that I can hold on to my knowledge with humility and be willing to learn, and that person seems to be their entire identity is their knowledge. Anyways, I'm not here to have debate about that. That's just a type of difficult person in the community that I've had to deal with.
Well, the question I was asking was, what comes to mind? How does it make you feel when you encounter these people?
Oh, how do you feel? Oh,
yeah. How do you feel, and what do you think?
I missed that entirely. I just thought,
like, oh no.
I just came into defining difficult people, but how do I feel? Oh, it depends. When I'm encountering a person who is resentful, I feel untrusting because it's like, if you are going to hold something against me, how deep does that list go? So I feel distrustful when someone is, what's the word? When someone is resentful. If someone is stubborn, I feel exhausted. I feel, oh, what's the word? I mean, primarily exhausted. Primarily, like, is this ever going to end? Is this person gonna, like, one day get it or something? I don't know. When I feel, when there's someone that is prideful, sometimes I can feel insecure, because their pride causes them to speak boldly about something. And so when someone comes at me boldly, sometimes it could be hard to dispute that. But that doesn't mean that they're right. That just means that they're bold in their pride. But that's how that would make me feel.
Yeah, I remember the first time I met Brandon, and it made me feel I'm just kidding.
I was so difficult.
Yeah. Well, the reason I want to ask this question first is because I think a lot of people look at leaders and people who are good at leading and people who are heads of communities, and they think, oh, well, they do it so fluidly a lot of the times, and they don't feel a certain way. They just have certain rules of logic that they govern by. And I think it's really important just to tease out the fact that we're all more alike than we are different.
Yeah.
And we all get frustrated and angry and annoyed to some degree, even Christians, believe it or not. But, the question was, what comes to mind, or how do you feel when you think about difficult people in your community? And there are a bunch of thoughts that come to my mind. And honestly, even though I know my role as a Christian and somebody who follows Jesus is to love those people and to be there for them within capacity and to show them the right example, everything in me just wants to run away from them. When it's like, you can tell that they don't want to pick up what you're throwing down or the good stuff, or they're just ignoring their responsibilities or whatever it is. It makes me want to run away. It makes me want to separate myself from them, because it's almost like they're making me share in what they're going through because they're not listening to reason. They're not listening to obedience. They're not listening to conviction. And I don't know. I think in part it makes me kind of angry too, because there's an answer. You don't want the answer. A lot of times when people are being difficult, well, I guess it's because they're either in a place where they're in need of something, they don't see it, or they're intentionally choosing that. And the intentionally choosing that side is what angers me the most, because they're not taking responsibility for themselves. And not only that, but they're forcing the people around them to partake in it so that they feel better about themselves, their lack of responsibility. And whenever, I don't know, the idea that people aren't responsible for themselves and it bleeds over into other people's lives really frustrates me. People's lives are hard enough, and a leader's life is hard enough. Just I mean, look at the president's life, right? The president cannot make any good decisions. It's virtually impossible.
Yeah.
They're gonna piss somebody off regardless of what the decision is.
Yep.
Um, and it's like, if you went around people pleasing, you're not going to make any progress whatsoever.
Yep.
And I think that's the crux of it, honestly. Difficult people, and the reason why it frustrates me the most is they're not concerned about the greater good. They're very insular and focused on themselves. So to me, it just it want kind of like that verse where it says that God gave them up to their own debased minds.
Yeah.
Because they were choosing that. It's like, well, that's you, brother. That's all you, and you get to have it. Don't bring that here. And that's something that you have to fight, though. But I don't know. Do you feel that same way too, Brandon, where you just want to run away from the very person that you're supposed to be loving?
Well, I mean, I like, okay, like sometimes I do. I haven't felt that in a long while, but yeah, there's sometimes more what I'll more likely do, however, as you're going over there by your guitar.
No, sorry, I'm super thirsty.
Okay. As I'm more likely to do is I will more so, well, okay, considering how my online community works, there are some things that I'm able to do that I can't do if I were to have a live in-person gathering. But if someone was really bothering me, sometimes I just kind of turn them down. So I don't have to hear them, because our community is currently robust enough that if I can't help someone else can, which is very nice. Like, I have some community leaders and members that are healthy, that have more patience in some areas that I don't have patience in. So I have sometimes when someone is really bothering me, like I've had one community member that I've kind of just turned their volume down so I don't have to hear their voice, because it just irritates the crap out of me. But avoid them, not. No, yeah, I've definitely felt tempted to avoid certain people in my community. I can't say that I've never done. I've definitely like I'll see someone in the chat. I'm like, don't want to deal with that today.
Yeah, I think another danger there too, especially as somebody who's in some form of leadership, where people acknowledge, hey, you're a figurehead of this community, is sharing in your frustrations with the people that you're supposed to be leading. Mm-hmm. So going back to the question, what comes to mind and how do you feel when you think about difficult people? It's one thing to think about it. It's another thing to talk about it. I mean, between me and my wife, we have very intimate conversations where we share everything that we're thinking, and sometimes I do struggle with allowing my frustrations with people to come out and me speaking what I'm thinking, which kind of creates a breeding ground for, okay, let's trash talk, instead of, if you go to 1 Corinthians 13, it says that we're supposed to have faith in people, have hope for people, and love them, which is not keep a record of their wrongs, not boast, and not rejoice when they seem less than us or miss the mark, But it's so easy when we get into that point where we feel like the person is not going to make it, to allow ourselves to engage in that. But I want to take a second to identify why we consider somebody to be difficult. And Brandon, you kind of already went into this, and I want to list a couple key things that come to mind. And if you guys in chat, or if you're watching this in the future, in the comments below, have anything that we missed, please speak up. But why do we consider someone to be difficult? And I think one of the biggest things for me is when they don't listen to conviction. When they just choose not, when they know better and they choose not to, when they choose, I guess that's just it. When they know better and they choose not to, they're being difficult because they want other people and their surroundings to take their responsibility for them, or just to give them a free ride, and that frustrates me because I see so many people. Like there's one person in particular who just deals with life the best they can. They've been dealt a very, very difficult hand. And every time I encounter them, I see that they're trying to choose a good thought life. They're trying to choose a good physical life. They're trying to choose a good financial and, excuse me, social life. They're trying their best, but there are issues in their life that are legitimately against them in a way where it makes it super hard. And then I see another person over here that probably deals with 1/10 of what this person deals with, but they're like, you know what? I don't even want to bother, but I want to complain about it.
Mhm.
And I want to engage in it in a way where I'm going to be sarcastic. I'm going to acknowledge that I have the power to fix and change my circumstances, but I'm just, I can't be asked to do it, you know? And also, I think one of the other things is people just being intentionally contrary.
Mm.
Somebody continuously being aggressive in a way where they don't want a resolution. They just want to fight. I read somewhere a long time ago that little men fight for little things because they have nothing big that they're chasing, right? And I always think about that when I get frustrated with something. It's like, why am I allowing myself to get angry about this? Is it because I'm so focused on having a small worldview and a small piece of the pie? Like if I'm worried about this small thing, obviously I'm not thinking about loving others or loving my community or having any impact. I'm just focused on myself. Honestly, those are the two main things that I would think that makes me consider somebody difficult when they aren't thinking of others and when they're intentionally not taking responsibility for themselves.
Yeah. Or if they're constantly complaining.
Yeah.
Oh, that's difficult. Like if someone just and you kind of mentioned that with the first one, like just complaining. They don't want to deal with the problem, but they want to complain about it. Like someone who comes in and complains, I have enough problems going on in my life to listen to your problems. Thank you. Plus, I understand that complaining about a problem does not change the problem. It just makes it worse. So I'd rather talk about, and complaining about things is not a problem in and of itself, because one of the things I don't want in my community is people to feel like they can't talk about what they're going through. But after doing so, and we've talked about it, or if we're trying to talk about it and you're not open to it and you just continue to complain, bit of a problem. And of course the stuff that we listed previously about being prideful and about stubbornness and stuff of that nature, resentfulness. These characteristics can be difficult to deal with.
Yeah, and I don't know why I thought about this, but I just want to say thank you a brief moment to our sponsor, Diet Dr. Pepper.
Hold on now. They are not our sponsor.
I'm just kidding. But this is a great moment to like and subscribe. I don't know. I don't know why I did that.
Careful now.
I just like Diet Dr. Pepper. But I want to posit just a thought real quick, since this is Thought Raid. Our perspective on difficulty will define our role in how we deal with difficult people. And I want to talk about 3 different roles: a leader, a follower, and a striver. And if you just take a moment and think about people that you respect, people that you would attribute the terms confident, solid, a foundation, a rock. A lot of people, I don't know why it makes my stomach turn when people say this, but when they say this person was my rock, like, I don't know. It's just one of those cheesy things that I don't get. It's okay if you do, but who would that person be in your life? Who would those people be in your life? And just think about how they engage difficulty, and not just difficulty, but difficult people. Do they engage those people by talking trash about them, speaking down to them, thinking little of them? Do they say you're not worth my time? Like, legitimately think about that. Like, Matt Peterson is a man that I think very highly of. Scott Couch is a man that I think very highly of. And if I ever stop and think, okay, well, this person that's frustrating me due to their level of difficulty, what if those guys were engaging with this person? How would they respond? And honestly, I just feel like a leader has a lot more posture. They know when not to say certain things, even though the person probably deserves it.
Yeah.
Which is like God. You taught me a long time ago, Brandon, that the difference between mercy and grace is when you're given something that you don't deserve.
Mm-hmm.
But mercy is when you're not given something that you do deserve.
Yeah.
And that just blows my mind how leaders can be merciful, where even though people deserve it, it's like, no, you're valuable. I have hope for you. I'm going to treat you as you should be and as you could be, not as you are.
Yeah, leaders have and recognize that they have a lot of power, but don't really typically flex said power. At least a good leader does not flex said power that they have. Usually, you do not understand the depths of a leader's power until it's too late.
Thanos.
And then the axe falls all at once, and everyone's like, what the heck happened? Like, we thought that we had you cornered or whatever. It's like, no, I've been fine this whole time. I've just been patient and merciful, but you have gone.
Brandon, that reminds me of like in every anime. I like the shonen anime, like Naruto and One Piece and stuff. There's always that one villain that's hiding in the background, and they look kind of like thin and weak and stuff, and they're quiet. They don't really do much for the first like half of the series, and then all of a sudden, after being exposed to all these big, strong enemies and whatnot, they take off their cloak and they're just like this lithe body, and then they had this little sword, and it's like whoosh, and they like destroy half a continent. I love those reveal moments, and it's so true in real life too. When you see a true leader reveal their power, it's awing,
Awe-inspiring?
Thank you. I always want to say all inspiring, but I guess it's all inspiring.
Yes.
But it really is, like when you can tell that somebody has something really good inside of them.
Yeah.
Right. And they're always quiet, but then you finally hear them speak. It's like, whoa. Or, like whenever you go to an event or you go to a concert, and they always have the frontlining bands where it's the band that opens for the band that opens for the band. Everybody's waiting for the one that comes last because they have the most oomph and the most gusto. They're who you really came to see. And it's like when we go to church, we go to church to engage with people, but to listen to the worship team and to listen to whoever's speaking that day. But truly, we're going to church to get a bigger picture of who Jesus is, and that's the whole awe-inspiring, like, that's what I'm talking about. And so when you think about the leader with regards to difficulty, they just have so much poise and so much more posture about how they navigate it. Then you have the follower, the person that realizes that they're not within a certain capacity, and they don't have the capacity or the current life situation or season where they're at right now. They're incapable of leading 2 steps ahead. They realize I need to follow a little bit before I can teach somebody something or guide somebody through this. And that's a place of humility. Yeah. I mean, being a leader is a place of humility as well, but you become a leader by following. You don't become a leader by trying to be a leader. And then you have the final person, the striver, and that's a follower who's trying to lead. And I wrote down a quick little snippet. A striver is somebody trying to lead or do when you need to follow and learn. And I'm just thinking about how that relates to our situation at hand, dealing with difficult people in your community.
You got to understand that every leader must also be a follower to something. Like, and like, just like every counselor needs a counselor, every leader needs a leader. So like, humanity is designed to lead, and also to like, we need to be submitted to something, and ultimately we need to be submitted to God is what I'm trying to lead towards, because God knows all things, sees all things, and is in all places, and is capable of leading us very well to a point that we feel fulfilled and full of his, like, full of his love, knowing that we are known and accepted regardless if other people see these things or not. I think a lot of people who strive want to skip the following position and go straight to leadership because that's what we're talking about. They want to lead, but it's like you can't even be a good leader if you're not submitted to someone or something. Like I feel like you have leaders like you might have a business. Well, you're still submitted to the United States of America if you're in the United States, or to even North Carolina governance. You're still submitted underneath of that. You try to live rogue to the country that's going to bring unnecessary problems onto yourself, kind of thing. But what if you were the president of the United States? Well, you still, in a way, are kind of submitted to the people of the United States. It's not like you're just a free man. Like you still have people to lead. Every leader needs to be also a follower. So to be in that place of striving is to think that you don't need to follow something, that you somehow have it all together. No, you don't have it all together. Even if you have a position of authority and you are a good leader, you are a good leader because you're following, and you're not doing everything by yourself, as if like I don't know, just because that's where they say absolute power corrupts absolutely. So if you're going to have a lot of power, you better be submitted to someone, so that way it doesn't go straight to your head.
Well, that's the thing, Brandon. I'm glad you say that, because when you think about community, because that's what we're talking about. This whole series is about community. When you think about community, it's not for you.
Right.
It's not for the leader. The community is not for the leader. The community is for the people. Right. So if you are the leader, that community is looking for you to steward its best interest, to encourage and empower, and to build up the other people so it can go on and breed other communities, right? And so if you have a whole group of people, a whole business, whole whatever that is following you, and you're taking people's livelihoods and welfare, and the fact that they're choosing to put all their thought and resources into you, and you're doing it for your benefit, that is a red flag.
Right.
You got to be super careful. When I first became a leader professionally, when I stepped into a role as a manager or whatever, it was weird. I was one of those striver people, because I should have been following. I should have been submitted. I should have gone into it from into a place of having the posture to learn and to admit my faults. But it was a new staff. It was a new store. I had this reputation for being an extremely high performer when it came to certain metrics. And so I felt like I had to uphold that. And in a couple live streams ago, we talked about how a lot of times people are appointed not because of their ability, but because of their tenure. And that is dangerous, right? You're supposed to appoint people because they can do the job, or at least are willing to learn how to do the job, right? And so for the first several months of me entering that position, I tried to do it for me. I tried to do it so that I would look good. I tried to do it so all of my metrics would maintain, so that my reputation would precede me, And the people that were following me then saw that I was doing it for me, and I wasn't really including them in the process. And I lost a lot of their respect. They were there because they had to do their job and they got paid to do it, and there were expectations before them. But were they actually following me? No. They were following the business. They were following their job expectation. They weren't following their leader. And man, that breeds insecurity if you're not careful. I mean, of course it does, because really you go down that rabbit hole to begin with because of insecurity. And when you see that it doesn't work, it just adds on to the security, So when you're thinking about leading a community or being a leader, if you want to be a leader, if you are thinking about yourself first, you're going to fail.
Yeah.
That's all there is to it. And you're going to create more difficult situations, because a difficult person setting the example will create more difficult people.
Yeah, and here's a real example of a risk of starting a community for yourself. Celebrities. The average American celebrity has communities that just naturally form underneath them, because people look up and they think, oh wow, this person, the life that they live, the luxury they have, whatever, the community begins under them. Watch that celebrity have an issue, and now it hurts a whole lot of people but I know for a fact that a lot of celebrities, they're like their fan group. It's all for them. Let me start this community for me and to build up me and look, whatever. But the problem, and people are willing to submit to that. People are willing to submit as your fan, to join you and be like, yes, we're a fan of you. You're great and everything. But like, half of those people are there for what they can get from that person. Half of those people are like, I don't know, have half, but like a part of them are for what they can get from the person. A part of them, are the people that follow this celebrity, are maybe actually being affected in a semi-positive way by this celebrity. And then other people are just aware and they like the person, but they just kind of keep it a distance because they create good stuff. I'm not trying to get anything out of you except to enjoy what you're making. And so it's a very unstable, thing. That's why you never want to put fame as your number one goal for life, because it's, again, you're living by people's approval. And so the minute that doesn't happen, what happens, you have celebrities get angry at the public. You have them thinking that they can make all these, like, I have arrived at this fandom, listen to my opinions about whatever. And it's just like, all they're doing is just stepping.
As he says when we have thought radar.
Yeah, but look, we have
people listen to our opinion.
Look, we have studied, been through, experienced these things. It's not like I don't have a bachelor's degree in counseling. Like, it's like, look, there's a difference between making bold statements on something that you didn't go to school studying for, and making bold statements on something that you studied for, experienced, and lived out. Like, there's a difference. If they were to make bold statements about the music industry or something that they were part of, cool. Like, you have the right, and you should be talking about those things because you've made it. So I get it. But, in other cases of, like, making bold statements about things outside of that, it's got to say it with, a form of humility. Anyways, that's not my point. My point, the thing that I'm focusing on more specifically is just that, building up a community for yourself and the dangerousness of that. Like, even if it does succeed and you've been able to do it because you have status, you're hurting people in the process. And that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I had a thought. What was it?
I'm so sorry. That was a long thought.
No, it's okay. So, something that I just thought of. We talked about what comes to mind when you feel, what comes to mind, or how do you feel when you think about difficult people in your community? Why do you consider a person to be difficult? Like, how do you quantify that? Like, what makes you think of them as difficult? And our perspective on difficulty will define our role in how we deal with them. I think the interesting thing, Brandon, is that the title of the stream is how to deal with difficult people in your community. We've not talked about anything about behavior management of them, right?
Yeah.
90% of how you deal with difficult people is here.
How you handle
mostly
yourself.
Here.
Yes.
It is mostly here.
It really is.
That person, because if you think about it, let's go to the Bible real quick, because everything that we do, speaking specifically for me and Brandon, everything that we do is based on who we believe Jesus to be, right? Because if he's the embodiment of love, and our commandment is to love God with all of our hearts and then love others as ourselves, then of course we want to model Jesus, right?
Right.
Now, but if you look in the Old Testament, Jesus was just talking to people, man. He was finding out what was on people's hearts. He was going to where people were and walking with them out of it, healing them out of it, telling them that their value is not their circumstances. And yet you had these Pharisees who were the strivers, the people who should have been following but were trying to lead. And all they were doing, they were focused on the do's and the whys of other people instead of themselves.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's a key indicator, and just something to be very careful of, that sometimes when you think that somebody else might be difficult, it might actually be you. And you got to be very careful of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly and truly, if you can't lead yourself, you cannot expect yourself to lead others well. That is the main thing. That is why I run thought rate as I do, talking about what I am going through and being vulnerable with that, because on a day-to-day basis, regardless if I'm talking to thousands of people or just one person, I'm always going to have to deal with myself. Like, by the end of the day, when the stream goes off, I'm still left with me. And I want to make sure that who you see here is what other people see when I'm not live, and what God sees when no one's watching. Like, because that's the main thing. Like, why would you want to listen to anything I have to say if I'm behaving this way on stream, but I'm a different person when no one else is watching? What would it say about me if you were to hear me talking in this place and then go on to UGN and then hear me talking a different way on that community? Wouldn't bode well. And so that's why it's really important. That's why we're spending more time talking about what are you doing with yourself as the leader of the community first, because that's what's most important. Everything flows out of that place.
So this next place I want to go with this is going to be, it's probably one of my favorite things to talk about, and it's boundaries.
Ooh.
And so here's the thing about boundaries. When you're actually leading, all you're really doing is maintaining morals and standards for yourself and creating an environment of staying within those boundaries, you know? So for instance, a boundary that I have in my marriage is that I'm not going to engage in pornography because I want to view my wife in a way where my eyes only see her, all that stuff just for her, right? I don't want that encroaching, and I don't want that being an idol in my life where it takes the place of her. That's just something that I've chosen, right? And in leading through that, I have to understand, okay, well, if I go outside of this boundary, I get back into the place of not being able to lead my wife well and lead my household well. I go back into the place of, okay, well, I need to follow because something else has control of my life and my thoughts, right? So when you when you get exposed to something that is truth, when you get exposed to something that actually encapsulates love and action, right? You have to create boundaries around that to protect it. What happens to a lot of good leaders is they see that, but they put more focus and they put more stock in the approval of man than the approval of God. When I say God specifically, what that would mean to somebody who doesn't acknowledge God for who he is they put loving other people, they put acceptance from other people over understanding how to love somebody, right? Now, let me give you an example. We used to have a Wednesday night group here. We're taking kind of a break, and there were just certain standards that I wouldn't allow myself to engage in. For instance, when I would rebuke somebody, that's a Christian term. When I saw an issue with somebody, what I would not do is call them out in front of everybody else. I would say, hey, can I talk to you privately? Or I would invite them over or whatever. I would say, hey, here's what I saw. Here's what I think is good. What do you think about this? Right? And if they asked me what I thought and how they should change, I would tell them. But I would say, hey, what you did was not cool because my boundaries are this and you encroached upon my boundaries in my household. I don't appreciate that. And if you continue to come here, I would ask that you respect my boundaries. What do you think of that? Right? And for my position as a leader, engaging in that, I'm just stewarding a position of love and an example of love in my household. And I'm not going to allow somebody else to change that. I don't want your approval. I should say, I don't want your approval more than I want to set that standard.
Yeah.
But what a lot of people do is they think, well, this is cool and all, but I'd rather feel accepted by somebody because I don't feel like my boundaries are more important. And once again, it's insecurity. But one thing I put in chat was boundaries are not your fault. Because difficult people, hear me, please, difficult people will make you feel like boundaries are your fault. And the reason for that is they don't want to accept them. And they get angry at you for setting a boundary that challenges them. People don't like to be challenged, especially if they're insecure, especially if they're getting value and identity from something that is false. So when you're trying to do something good for yourself and you're trying to follow and somebody says, don't do that, and you're trying to put up this boundary of, I don't want to go to that place. For instance, if you are a recovering alcoholic and a boundary that you put in place for yourself is, I'm not going to go to bars. and somebody says, "What do you mean you're not going to go to bars? Are you dumb? Come on, you're bigger than that. You can handle one beer. Are you a man or are you a woman?" That whole sexist mindset and the drink. Like, there's a lot of really crazy bad things that people say to try and push you out of your boundaries, and they make you feel like having a boundary is a bad thing. And I've done that so many times in my life where somebody has had a boundary where they were trying to keep themselves in a good place in certain aspects of their life, and I said, well, I don't have that conviction. And if you love me, you'll come out of that boundary to where I'm at. Right. And those people have come out of that boundary to where I'm at. And then in the moment, it feels good because I'm getting my way and I'm getting the validation of saying, oh, they chose me of their boundaries, so I have value. Right. But then down the road, I see that I've hurt them.
Yeah.
And yeah. So, guys, your boundaries are not your fault. Your boundaries are how you engage in loving other people and how you learn to lead.
Yeah, that's another reason why we began at the beginning of saying, make sure your goals are clear before you start the community, because you will have people that will be like, well, they'll just try to, like one of the most probably difficult boundaries, depending on how really good the community is, probably if you were to have like time frames, the community will meet at this time and will end at that time. One of the most probably difficult boundaries to set, because people will inevitably at the end want to chatter on their way out the door. But if that's something that is very important for you to keep, if you don't hold the boundary, if you don't hold the goal, no one else is going to do that for you. You may happen to have someone who'd be like, okay, let's do it. And in fact, that again is why it's important to have a team, because when you're weak, some of your team members can be strong, be like, Brandon, okay, I know you don't like enforcing this boundary, but you need to. So, enforce that boundary, that kind of things that can help give you the oomph necessary to stand up to people, because not everyone is going to resist a boundary for malicious reasons. Most of the time it's just because, whatever, just focus on other things. It's just not necessary for them. So that's kind of thing. So don't as a leader, don't live for people's acceptance, because that will constantly blur the line of where the goals and the boundaries are in your life, and it can cause you to become resentful towards the people that try to cross those boundaries, when reality is it's your job to enforce it, and no one else is going to enforce it but you. And you do not want to live with resentment towards your community, because that will end up causing problems within the community that are unnecessary, that are simply easily taken care of by having and maintaining boundaries and not living for the community's acceptance of you.
Yeah. So, guys, I'm going to actually put this into play so you see what we're talking about. When I worked for GameStop, I had a series of employees. I'm not going to call out one in particular because this is the same process for each employee, but I would have employees that would underperform. And when you're setting goals for people, they're called SMART goals. You identify exactly what you want them to do, you teach them how to do it, you practice with them, and then you give them measurable expectations for how many times they do it, how many they try, adjust, and fail. Right? And so what we would do is we would talk to people who were low performers and say, hey, I noticed you're performing way below average. Here are some actions I want you to take. And we would say, okay, well, it's called show and tell. I'm going to show you how to do it. Then I'm going to teach you how to do it. Right. So we'd go through that process, and they would go through the motions, and they would commit whatever actions that I had just shown them. And it's like, okay, well, you see how to do it. Now I want you to practice it 5 times during your shift today. Right. And they would practice it 5 times during their shift. And then at the end, I would say, okay, well, teach me how to do this. And they'd be able to teach me how to do it. And that process would happen every time I would work with them. Well, after about a month of doing that, I would watch the cameras, and I would see that when I was not present, they would not do what I expected them to do. So basically what I'm saying is I set a boundary. I taught them how to stay within the boundary and thrive within that boundary. And then I told them what my expectations were regarding that boundary. Right. And then I looked at what they would do. And when they would choose not to do that, I would have to write them up or give them, they were called coaching plans. Basically, hey, you're in trouble because you're not meeting my expectations and I'm kind of annoyed, but I'm not going to say I'm annoyed because really this is supposed to be a teaching moment. But basically, you're dropping the ball and it's your own fault. And with certain employees, this happened a series of times. And when it came to the point where I had to fire them, one of them got very upset at me and they said, well, why are you firing me? That's not cool. And they got pretty upset. And, one of the biggest life lessons that I've learned is engaging this and coming at it from a place of confidence, saying, well, I don't want you to be fired any more than you do. I like you as a person. You're the one that chose this. And that's the key, guys. When you set a boundary and it's a healthy boundary and the person acknowledges that the boundary is healthy and they say, yeah, this is good. And they say, yeah, I know how to stay within that boundary. And they choose not to do it. They are responsible for their circumstances. That is not your fault. But it's very easy to receive it as your fault if you don't think, okay, well, I believe in this myself. Right. So just practical application. Do you have anything to say about that before we move on, Brandon?
Well, yeah, I mean, that goes just right back into the whole thing of not living for someone's approval, because if you need to set up a boundary, like, not everyone's going to understand the boundary. And so by not living by people's approval and instead living for the health of the community as a whole, and not to say that you I don't know what word that is, and you want your community to be your identity. That's not what I'm trying to say. But just in general, but you're thinking about the health of the community rather than your own personal approval, then it makes it a lot easier to make those final decisions to shut down toxic behavior that's going to cause a problem with the community. If someone is presented with, if you communicate, you have to first communicate that there's, like you're saying, the process that you went through before you finally got to firing a person. If you communicate, you have to first I can say if. You have to first communicate the boundary and explain where the boundary is and how to respect the boundary. And then after the boundary has been set, then you can then take the next step with them if they continue to ignore it. And then after a while, there has to be that final moment. There has to be a consequence. Otherwise, it's not a boundary without a consequence. And so that consequence eventually will be banning them, kicking them out, whatever. But if that's not there, the people who are toxic will find what they can do and get away with.
Man, somebody yesterday asked me about why God lets things like the Holocaust happen. He said, if God exists, why does he let all these people die and suffer? And before I understood boundaries and consequences, that really messed with me because I thought, well, if God is who he says he is and he loves people, he would prevent all this stuff. Why would he let people suffer? And the truth isn't an easy pill to swallow. But if you go back to the Garden of Eden, in order for there to be choice, there has to be temptation. In order for there to be choice, there has to be temptation to choose good or bad. Right? So that same person said, well, did God create sin? Well, no, he didn't. Because sin, it's not as simple as hot and cold, because cold doesn't exist. Cold is just the absence of heat, or it's just not as hot. It doesn't go from 80 degrees to cold degrees. It goes to 80 degrees to 2 degrees. It's just not as hot. And so in the same vein, it doesn't go from God to sin. It goes to God to little or no God, or lack of God. But in the Garden of Eden, people chose, Eve chose to go and pursue that fruit. And there was a consequence attached from that. And basically the consequence was, well, there's sin with this, and that can't be in the presence of God. So the consequence of choosing that is being apart, right? Much like the consequence of me like we were talking about yesterday, eating all those unhealthy foods is my arteries getting clogged and me getting fat. It's a consequence that I chose that I could feel bad about myself about and blame everybody else for, but I'm choosing that. But what I put in chat was in Luke 6:27, it talks about loving your enemies. And specifically, this keeps popping out to me. It's like such a huge thing that God's been talking to me about. It says at the end, it's like God is kind to the wicked and the ungrateful. And if I think about people in my communities that have been the most difficult, whether they're just not taking accountability for themselves or they're choosing intentionally to and spitefully to try and break up situations, they lie to me about certain things. There are people in our community that have lied to me about things, and I know that. They don't know that I know that, but I know that.
That's the fun
And
part about being a good leader. Everything flows up to you.
yeah, and when you have when you look at things from the lens of zooming out, zooming out, zooming out, you see more, right? When you're so zoomed in, you have a very limited perspective. But kind of like the Thanos thing we said earlier, a good leader has to choose when they're going to take action and how they're going to take action. And being kind to people who spit on you, being kind to people who hit you and lie to you and rob from you and stuff, that's really tough. And it does not make logical sense. Honestly, if we lived this out, we probably wouldn't put locks on our doors. We would welcome people in to rob us we wouldn't welcome it. But if it would happen, it's like, well, here, take my coat too. Oh, you hit me on the left cheek, here's my right cheek, go ahead. And just like Jesus, when he was being tortured by the Romans, he didn't try and run away. He didn't snap his fingers like he could have because he was God incarnate. He didn't smite people. He didn't talk his way out of it because he could have said, here's who I am. He could have said that. He didn't say that. He held his peace. And then when he was being tortured, he just stood right up and took it again, because we were worth it. And so being kind to the wicked and the ungrateful is just like that because Brandon, you taught me this a long time ago. Hurting people hurt people. Hurting people are difficult people because they lack something.
Yeah.
Hurting people are difficult people because they don't believe that they're valuable. They don't think they have something to give. They have a deficiency of some sort, and they're trying to soak it up from the environment around them instead of doing what they should be able to do themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, we have a certain amount of time that we're alive. And during this time that we're alive is a time we are not currently facing the judgment of the life that we've lived. And so God wants to give every person an equal opportunity to recognize the harm that they're doing. Some people figure that out quickly. Some people take to the very last breath of their life, and some people not at all. But we don't know. We are not God, and therefore we do not know who will get it and who won't get it. And so it is our job, who are not, as people who are not infinite, are not omnipresent and omniscient, to not be the judge. It's not our job to judge. It's our job to be kind, to forgive those who persecute us, to pray for them, to love them, to be kind to the wicked and the ungrateful. And by doing that, then we are, one, preventing them from having some kind of excuse against us, and two, it opens the door for them to hopefully get what they're going through, and like what they're causing other people to go through by their actions, that is, and to realize the hurt that's on the inside and to begin to heal. You got to realize when you're developing a community and you've got difficult people, the reason why we answer evil with good is because if someone who's been raised up in a very difficult environment, all they've experienced is hurt, pain, and evil. And so to continue to get them back, to get revenge, to hurt them, to immediately just throw them out for the first infraction they make, unless, of course, again, that they're just that toxic and they're going to cause issues way too fast. If it's not that case, you respond with good regardless in any situation, because that's something they haven't experienced. How do you know what good is if all you've experienced is crap since the day you were born? You don't know until someone decides to treat you differently than you have been treated your whole life.
Brandon, I can't. Okay, so there was this video that popped up, on social media, just random videos are suggested for you.
Yes.
I saw this video the other day of this Vietnamese guy, and basically, I forget which war it was. Maybe the Vietnamese War. I don't know.
Makes sense.
This guy is like 41, and he and his father lived in the jungle, right? And he's lived in the jungle ever since he was like a small child. and his teeth are all black, and he's covered in like hides and things that he's made himself, but that's all he's known. It's just been him and his father in the jungle out in Vietnam. And he knows how to make food, shelter, and he knows how to survive, but he's never encountered people. And so it was a brief documentary on him entering society, and it said that it was a very difficult adjustment. And one of his family members said, there were some kids playing outside, and one of his family members said, "Hey, take a stick and threaten those kids so that they'll shut up." And not only did he threaten those kids, but he severely beat one of them because he didn't have a sense of what was right and what was wrong. He just knew that he was told, make the kids be quiet. And that's how these people are when they don't have and they've never had a good model for what love is. If they've never had a good model for what a leader is, they're incapable of leading. If I have never had somebody teach me how to play guitar, I don't know how to play guitar. I don't have a sense of it. I don't even know what chords look like. I have to figure it out myself, and it takes a lot longer. So, I think what I want to wrap up with is the question that you should ask when you engage difficult people in your community, right? So go through all these questions, think about 90% of it is you, right? And this last part, honestly, is you as well as a leader. How do you engage people that are difficult? And you just ask yourself, what do they really need? I know this looks like what they need. What it looks like they need is a kick in the butt. What it looks like they need is somebody just to tell them off or just get upset with them. That's what they need. They just need a firm hand, right? But what do they really need, right? If somebody is so talkative and you tell them, hey, let other people talk. Hey, don't ask weird questions like that. What do they really need, right? They probably need to be shown the example of what it's like to enter conversation from the position of being focused on the other person, asking questions, or realizing that their value doesn't come from what they get from somebody in a conversation. What do they really need? Somebody comes in and they have a really poor attitude. They get angry at people so frequently. What do they really need? They might need a good role model. They might need a good father figure because their dad responded that same way to their mom his entire life. What do they really need? Because if you think about your relationship with Jesus, and if you don't have a relationship with Jesus, well, I don't just take it for what I'm saying. Then, God is always asking, okay, what does this person really need? Because the other day I was sitting down and I was like, all right, God, I'm gonna have a quiet time with you. I'm gonna ask you all these questions, like, what do you want me to do, and how do you feel? God, and He told me to pick up my guitar and play my guitar. And I'm like, that's not what I asked you. I wanted, what should I do about my business? How should I feel about this? What should I do about this? What should I do? And he said, pick up your guitar. What? And he was talking to me about rhythm and different chords. I said, God, how do you feel? Expecting him to say, well, Tim, you've been a little bit lazy. I feel frustrated with you. And he said, excited. I'm like, you feel excited? Why do you, what? And what God was showing me was I didn't need direction. I didn't need conviction or condemnation. God doesn't condemn you anyways. What I needed was encouragement. What I needed was to be refocused on where I'm going, not what I'm running away from. Right? It's so weird. And yet we think that the answer lies in giving people what they think that they want. But as leaders, that's not what we're called to do. We're called to have a bigger perspective and see, okay, where don't they feel loved? Why don't they feel loved? Why aren't they walking in their identity? Why don't they feel like they have value?
Yeah.
What do they really need?
And sometimes they need correction.
Boundaries. Yeah.
Boundaries. Yeah. If you got someone who's stubborn, or you have someone who's unruly and doesn't know how to control themselves, having that conversation with them and setting up those boundaries could be the very thing that they need, and it may be very uncomfortable to do that. Like I have a community member that I love to death who I had to get to a place where I was just completely and totally honest with them about how I felt and what I thought about their lives, and to the degree of which I actually trust them to how they perceive that I trust them. And I was very confrontational about that, but that completely changed the situation around for the two of us, and it has been so much better since that point. I have absolutely much more enjoyed talking to this person. So like that was necessary. But I have another community member who I was hard on quite frequently, and the Lord convicted me, and the Lord was like, "You're spending all this time telling this community what they need to do. You've spent no time complimenting them and how well they're doing and recognizing the growth that they've been doing." So I've needed instead to shift and be humble and instead say, "Hey, you're doing really good in this area, this area, this area." And since that point, they've also really grown. Once they realize, wow, I'm actually doing a good job in something. What a concept. It's like, yeah, you are. I just, something about that person just kind of invited nitpickiness. And I needed to like get out of that and actually compliment them.
Yeah, that reminds me of something else, Brandon. When I was working in my previous job, focusing on what people were doing right did so much more than focusing on what they were doing wrong. Because the thing about people is everybody has strengths. Everybody has different things that they're good at and things that they're naturally inclined to. And as leaders, it's really easy to think, okay, well, I've blazed the trail. I've gotten where I'm at, and I'm a leader, and I'm at my position because of what I've done. Everybody beneath me and everybody that's going to come after me has to do it the way that I did it, right? But the thing about leadership is that you're not supposed to create duplicates of you. You're supposed to duplicate yourself. Yes. You're supposed to duplicate good habits. You're supposed to duplicate love. Yes, absolutely. But you're supposed to encourage, inspire, uplift. You're supposed to believe in people, have faith in people, and you're supposed to bring out who God made them to be, right? You can't turn a drum into a guitar, much less than you can turn a guitar into a flute. It just does not happen. They have different applications and they both sound good in their own regards. And you just have to keep that in focus. You can't also judge somebody for being a poor speaker when speaking is not what they were intended to do. Maybe they were supposed to build something or play music.
Right.
And your job as leader is to find that and tease that out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Encouraging someone in an area that they're doing well in. Like, don't feel weird about encouraging the right behaviors in people. Like, please do not shy away from words of affirmation. It's a very valid love language that people really receive well from, whether it's their primary one that they receive or not. Hearing you're doing good and this is what you're doing best in. As a person who does happen to really need that, hearing where I'm doing good encourages me to do even better in that area. Like, I would just want to do all the more that I can because I recognize that I'm seen and valued and appreciated in that. So I'm no longer afraid. That takes away some of the fear, which empowers me to go a lot further unhindered by fear. And now I'm accomplishing even more because I'm recognized and I am validated and I am accepted. And sometimes that's how you have to help difficult people. Sometimes difficult people have never had that. And that is the way that you break down the difficulty, is by recognizing the good. And in fact, you need to do that with pretty much anybody, is to work to see the best. If you cannot see the value of a person or what good they can bring to the table, there is brokenness on the inside of you that you must deal with, because everyone has redeeming qualities to them that must be recognized and shown, regardless if they actually act on it or not. That's up to them. But it is our job as leaders and community developers to see the potential and the value in every person, and everyone does. And if you don't see that, go to God about it, because he will show you what they're meant to be. One of the most annoying people in my community that I've had, God has shown me that he has given that person an anointing similar to that of Paul and Silas, which were two people that radically changed the Christian world and getting it started in the first place. That's a huge thing. And that same person is the same person who's very prideful and belittling and all that kind of stuff, but God sees something far greater than what their rough exterior shows me. Everyone has it. So if you can't see that there is something on the inside of it needs to change, and you want to get some perspective from God to help see that in other people, because everyone has that. the end of the day, I feel like the only difficult people that you should not have in your community are those that are actively, unapologetically, no matter what you try to do about it, trying to destroy the community. Like, you can see that they're continuously working against you, and you can see that like there is a big difference between you feel insecure about it to they actually are doing it. And that you can tell, and there's just a difference of a presence with such a person. We had to deal with that with UGN in the very beginning of it, a person who was literally trying to usurp me and my authority.
Morgan Freeman.
The Morgan Freeman, yes.
Not
the literal Morgan Freeman, a guy by the name the Morgan Freeman, just to make some clarity here. But other than that, if that's not happening, then virtually most any other type of difficult person you have the capability to work with through, and if not you in the moment, that's why you want to have other people in the community that can deal with them while you are being built up yourself, so that you can eventually come back one day and help them.
Yeah, and also you got to be careful with how you view yourself in that, because by evicting somebody from your community during all that, you're not denying their value.
Right.
You're basically acknowledging that they're choosing to stay on this side of your boundary.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, you want to make sure that if you're going to be evicting a person, that you're not doing it because you're insecure about it, or that you are thinking that something is going. You want to be sure that what they're doing is truly destructive before you just make a decision. But if you just happen to be feeling insecure or angry or something, that's not necessarily a sign yet that something that drastic needs to be done. The reason why you want to make sure that you work on your personal insecurities and not allow that person to bother you is because by keeping them in the community, if they're just simply difficult, your community could change their life. Like, I've had several people in UGN that came in difficult, but are now my leader, and have kind of complete 1080 from who they used to be, from coming in and wanting to destroy the community to now wanting to build it and preserve it. Like, they could become your biggest allies. So that's why you want to make sure that you're working on yourself first and foremost. And then, as we're talking about, setting up boundaries as necessary, making sure that they know what they should be doing, what the rules, the guidelines are, being kind and patient with them, and bring them before God so that God can show you their value and their worth. All that together can help you with the difficult people in your community. Mm-hmm. Forgiveness and humility, very important as a leader. So, is there anything else to add to that before we close out, Tim?
I think our deed is done.
Awesome. Well, that completes the series. So, again, if you'd like to see the rest of it, we have Friday and Saturday of last week, how to develop the perfect community, which goes into the definition of it and some tactics and stuff. And then today is the conclusion of that, how to actually deal with the difficult people. So this has been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it a whole lot. So I want to thank you guys for watching. It's been a lot of fun. If this broadcast has meant a lot to you, I would like to encourage you to like it, to share it with other people, because that will just help us when it comes to algorithms. I mean, just be flat up and honest. Like, when it comes to YouTube and Facebook, the more things are seen, the more things are seen. And liking things and sharing things help it get seen faster, which can help in turn help us grow Thought Raid to a place where, again, our goal is to make this into a full-time job. But that being said, we broadcast every week on Monday, Friday, and Saturday, so we'll be live again this Monday at 4 p.m. where we'll be talking about things that we're going through and how we're handling them, so we'd love to have you there for that. And I want to thank you guys for watching. You have a good evening. Bye, everybody.